Welcome everyone to Tavern Talk. I'm joined today by Kodiak. Say hello, Kodiak.
Good afternoon.
Say hello, Lex.
Hello.
Quick note before we start the show. Delinzia has moved on to do other things. We wish him all the best in all his endeavours and hope he achieves all the goals that he wants to, and wish him well. Now getting on to today's topics. Obviously we will be covering the Pantheon and VR news. Our forum hot topics for today are Contagions and biological implications of Terminus. And the second one is arena style PvP Spectator mechanics. And then obviously the latest screenshots that we have from VR. Lex, you want to go and kick off the VR news and Pantheon news?
Sure. Well, their first tweet was, if this building in Pantheon was yours to keep, what would you do with it? We've got a couple pretty funny things here. Okay, so I'm not even going to try and slaughter the first guy's name, but it says, hide the bodies of my victims. Chris Mayrez says, add some bunks and a wood-burning stove to better accommodate my party. Rastia says, neon glowing signs and disco balls everywhere. Quest says, I would decorate the house. Obviously. Spooky Weebo, I don't even know what the rest of that says. Basically says he's going to use it for parties. Darren says, going to start by selling one of my table sets on King's List. Clever. Stephen Wolf says, this will definitely be my personal sanctuary. Count Crocula, Raz, says, hire an interior designer and redecorate it. Thomas Bell says, hold sacred rituals to sacrifice the virgins of Terminus in remembrance of the deities of Gravenhold. Grok? I slaughtered that one. Tina Singleton says, put a fireplace in for extra ambient lighting. Lots of animal heads and skins. Some fool named Lexer says, hang halflings from the walls and use them like dartboards. I mean, have friends over for a drink and relax. TK says, I would craft new stuff and make plans to sell it. Like some kind of fantasy Ferengi. Also, I'd have house parties. Scott Jessless says, get some lighting installed. Hero of Pixels says, hold up. Are those outdoor patio chairs? They have got to go. I need some fancy chairs in there, candles, and a gold bathtub. I like it. I like their style. Leah Sundergaard says, bigger windows, more windows, fireplace, stove, place for my knitting, sewing, and food preparation. Outside, forge, and tanning. James Bennett says, anything and everything I could, from changing the floor and wall materials to redecorating and maybe traps. Another proud Pantheon says, I'd probably be too busy adventuring, and it would eventually turn into a hideout for bandits. Or worse. Jimmy Torngate says, decorate it! Bard King says, turn it into a seedy tavern full of bar wenches and obnoxious music, but serve only the best ale and beer. Invite only. Nick Shayenko says, rent it. This room isn't fit for dwarven excellence. Hugo Desjardins says, 1. Redecorate. 2. Trap under a bearskin. In basement is a necromancer's hideout. 3. Sacrifices. Raise undead. 4. Attack other villages. Like his style, too. Albert Atkinson says, craft. Hopefully with stationary house crafting stations. Fix it up. Store my valuable treasure. Frogzor, we all know who Frogzor is, says, looks like a tavern or inn area. Hopefully it's happy hour.
Awesome. Kodak, do you want to carry on with the next part?
Yeah, next, Pantheon MMO tweeted, do you prefer PvE or PvP or both? And what draws you to that style over the other? Guys, what do you think?
Lex, you start off, mate.
Well, I'm a diehard PvEer. I love the challenges, mostly because that's all these dungeons and raids are. It's a challenge set forth. There's no way that it can be geared towards someone else versus another person. It's an equal challenge to everybody. And it gives you a very good sense of accomplishment. On the other hand, there have been games that if you do PvP well, and I mean perfect, I will play it. And I will play it a lot.
Awesome. I kind of see it the same way that Lex does on the PvE part. There's so much to do in PvE on equal terms. Everybody's basically on the same level. We all have to manage the challenges and accomplish the challenges and overcome them. PvP, we'll get into that when we get into the form hot topic. But basically, the arena style PvP spectator mechanics is kind of where I would I would basically support PvP in a PvE server. For instance, I would never play on a PvP server. I just can't do it. I can't get behind all the young kids. They're all so fast nowadays and quick to battle, and I'm just too old to deal with it. Yeah. What about you, Kodiak?
I'm definitely PvE 100%. I love the story-driven, lore, sandbox, whatever. I'm not a big fan of PvP. Why? Because I get my butt kicked all the time by those little kids. Now, that being said, I did enjoy PvP in, Warhammer, because there were certain areas. So it was open world, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but then, when you had, they had meeting grounds from, evil and good, and then they would come together, and it'd be, an area. But once you left that area, then it went back to PvE, and you were fine. So if you wanted to participate, you could, or you didn't have to. And that was one of the things that I did like about that game. So I don't want it to be forced one way or the other. That's why I would never play on a PvP server. As far as instances, I think that PvP, this is my own personal opinion, should be an instance thing where you can get in, Counter-Strike, do a match, come back out, do a match, come back out, just like World of Warcraft. Or, like I said, or an open world type scenario in a designated area.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to move on now to the forum hot topics. It was very, the news from VR and Pantheon has been short this week. Obviously very busy preparing stuff and everything. So we're going to get into the first forum topic, which is Contagions and biological implications of Terminus. And this was a forum post by Sintro. I'm going to go and read off of it, bring you all into the general idea, and then we're going to talk a bit about this. So he starts off saying, throughout our own history, we have witnessed the often devastating biological effects of mixing previously isolated human populations. For example, during the Columbian Exchange, the Old World and the New World both suffered each other's diseases, as the hemispheres collided, where native North Americans fatally dealt with bubonic plague, chickenpox, leprosy, and yellow fever, while Eurasia became infected with syphilis, Bejel, and Chagas. Now imagine the world what would happen if we threw 9 independently evolved species all in one planet. Welcome to Terminus, Rise of the Diseases. Terminus is a melting pot of diseases, and every virologist's wet dream. The inevitable disease exchange between the races has some really fun in-game consequences, and I'd like to share a couple of ideas with you all. Some of you might have experienced my other grandiose theory crafting posts. Bear with me please, this one is a doozy. New spell type, zoonotic disease. In the case of Terminus, we're dealing with independent species bringing their own viruses to Terminus and unleashing them on the world, leaving them to adapt at their own will. Eventually, one viral mutation will lead to a virus to adapt to the biological context of a new species through a process called cross-species transmission, CST. In our experiences on Earth, zoonotic diseases are practically devastating. HIV/AIDS, SARS, Ebola, swine flu, rabies, and bird flu. I propose there be a new spell type, zoonotic disease. If every race could infect each other's race with just one zoonotic disease, we would have a total of 81 new diseases, 9 for each race. These spells would be passively cast through a new mechanism, Contagious, see below. The cool thing about these diseases would be their dynamic impact. Just like in real life, an untreated disease of this nature ramps its intensity gradually, eventually leading the host to death's door. In Pantheon, if a character becomes infected with a zoonotic disease, it would be a slowly ramping debuff that could not be simply cured with a standard cure disease spell. New spell lines, immunization. Players need a way to somehow deal with these specialized diseases, which invites the opportunity to create a new utility spell. I propose that clerics, or a new class see below, gain access to zoonotic disease-specific immunization spell lines. If a group composed of humans, elves and dwarves are going to travel to battle some ogres, it is very likely they will catch a zoonotic disease prior to their exit. They would be wise to seek out a local cleric and pay them to cast a long-duration immunization spell, specifically to avoid becoming infected with whatever disgusting ogre diseases are growing in between their toes. These spells would last weeks, so the frequency of immunization wouldn't become a time burden for players. If the group didn't have a cleric which was able to cast this immunity, that's fine. Recall that these diseases are slow acting. After initial infection, the debuffs would be very minor and hardly noticeable. However, if you haven't gotten treatment after 2 weeks of your ogre encounter, you'd probably have to address your illness before continuing your journeys or suffer the consequences. So it carries on with new mechanism, Contagious. I propose that for the zoonotic disease, a new mechanism of infection be introduced. The zoonotic diseases would be passively cast spells from one host to another, via proximity and exposure time, possibly taking advantage of the atmosphere mechanic. The susceptibility of diseases would be determined by the combination of a character's innate racial resistance, equipment, and immunization status. This could lead to some really interesting disease dynamics where whole cities could be infected, leading to the emergence of epidemics and pandemics. This process includes both player NPC infection. It's quite a long doozy post. We're going to almost finish. New passive ability, adaptive immunity. Each race would have already adapted resistances to their own diseases. Similarly, given enough time to being infected with a zoonotic disease, a character has the ability to gain adaptive immunity towards that disease, no longer requiring the continual services of a cleric. For the particularly sturdy races, ogres and Scar, this process would be accelerated and they would be able to acquire all adaptive immunities without too much issue. However, for the more feeble races, gnomes and halflings, this process would take many encounters with the disease, with the exception of acquiring adaptive immunity much later on, level 40 as an example. The prospect of gaining adaptive immunity would force the character to make a choice when they encounter a disease. Should I just get temporarily immunized, or should I work on my adaptive immunity and let myself get infected for a short while? This could be a fun skill to max for completionists. Also, progeny characters would inherit their progenitor's adaptive immunity. And the final one is new class, Plague Doctor. Group role. Spell damage over time, DOT, support. Armor, cloth, leather, plague masks. Weaponry. Plague Doctors have been trained to use piercing and one-handed slashing tools developed to handle the unfortunate consequences of zoonotic diseases, primarily using medical daggers for bloodletting and a textbook filled with medical information. The good doctor could also wield an offhand hacksaw for the occasional amputation. Ability arsenal. Plague Doctors are a class bred from necessity, being trained as masters in zoonotic diseases immunization that can harness their medical techniques to great harm towards an enemy, including the intentional misuse of techniques such as bloodletting, the use of leeches, and cauterization. They are the only class able to cast accelerated and modified versions of the diseases they have mastered, resulting in them having an arsenal of devastating dots and debuffs. Iconic ability, Mutagenesis. Through their intense studying, plague doctors have gained the ability to engineer highly unstable strains of viruses. As a result of being infected with the mutagenic virus, the host will suffer an onslaught of uncurable randomized sequences of debuffs. That's basically the extent of that long post. What's your thoughts on having something like this be in game? We'll start with you,
now,
Kodiak.
all of that being said, I read the whole thing and I thought it got my juices flowing. Now, I do think that just like with elemental magic or arcane magic, they have fire and water and whatever, that they should break disease up a little bit more than just your disease, whether it's rabies or I think I put an inherited disease, which would be a racial aspect disease. Infectious disease, maybe like if you're going through a swamp, you get disease, you have to get it cured. They could break more diseases into like a brain disease where now it affects your mana regen. They can have a blood disease that affects your health regen, not just poison disease or a the normal. I think they should expand on disease, but I mean doing that other thing I think is going to be way too crazy. Like 81 different, mutated diseases. I mean, that's just way insane. But I think that they could add different, because then you have different cures. You have and you can break up the cures into different classes. So maybe, druids can cure one type of disease that shamans can't. And clerics and summoners and so on and so forth. Enchanters might be able to cure the brain disease, because it affects mana. Stuff like that, where they can actually break up the disease or the infectious disease, break it apart. I think that would be kind of cool.
Awesome. Lex, your take.
I think it's a really good idea, but there's so much to it that it's almost a game in itself, just to put that in there. That being said, I think you could have a place in the game where you could basically say, I have like a 1% chance every hour to get a disease from someone in my group. Okay, cool. But it's just a minor little debuff, no big deal. Just something that's more like, you got me sick. Maybe it's this very minor, like, -2 strength or something, whatever. But I do feel that it would do a world of good to have like an infectious plague for a GM event or just a world dynamic event. And one of the only major flaws I see in Sintro's idea is just like you don't want to give the power to infect people to other players because that's just going to cause chaos. And I don't mean the chaos like a plague would cause. I'm talking chaos like, why am I playing this game right now? I don't want to group with no one, or I don't want to be around people, and it's a group-oriented game, and you're basically saying other players have the ability to affect my gameplay.
There's going to be a spell called hand sanitizer.
I could.
Yeah. But like for a GM event, you could just say, like the event starts, you randomly infect 10 players, just randomly. And people that are nearby have like a 20% chance to get infected. And you're just like, where did this come from? And before you know it, people are like dying left and right. Mind you, it would have to be, balanced correctly. But it would make for a very interesting event.
Yeah, I could totally see. I mean, if the cold's going to affect us and the heat's going to affect us and all these other elemental things are going to affect us, why not a disease in certain zones or certain areas or certain classes or certain,
So let me go.
You know what I'm saying?
Let me go and bring this in then, because I was actually thinking about that aspect of things. We know there's going to be environmental impact in the game, and we have different zones. I mean, anybody's read up on the lore of Wild End? Wild End is called Wild End for a reason. It has unique aspects to it that are only seen in Wild End, and in the lore basically on Wild's End, the humans actually kind of stayed away from it. They were fearful of Wild's End for a long period of time, and this could, this kind of brought me the idea. If we have different zones and different environmental impacts in these zones, this is where this kind of system could come into play, where you do get a unique zone disease in the game. So you go into Wild's End, so the contagion or biological implication that would happen would be such and such a disease. If you go into Avendir's Pass, there's going to be this. If you go into the Ogre area, it's going to be this. If you go over to the Sky, they're going to have this. Because they all have their unique plants and herbs, etc., only to that region or to that zone, to that area.
Yeah, and that race would be immune to that, but anybody else that came into that zone may have a negative impact on them, and it'd be vice versa if that race went into their zone.
And this kind of brought me up on the idea. Like this kind of brought me up on an idea that I discussed before I had to go to work the other day. We kind of got to talking. I don't know what it was about. It was about viruses and such, and we carried on. And then I brought up the idea about having to go to all taverns in the game as something to do to bring up your alcohol skill. And then we got into the discussion of basically, well, that could also bring out mixed messages that Pantheon is trying to promote, drinking is cool. So I got into the idea.
It is.
So I kind of basically approached it differently. Said, okay, what about this? Let's say in Wild's End, the halflings use a special herb and plant that is only unique to that area. And by you drinking that drink, that would, you would go to the taverns in Wild End, you would drink it, you would drink their drink that they make out of those herbs and everything. The more you drink it, the better your resistance becomes against this disease. You can't necessarily completely wipe it out, but you get a better resist from it. The same would be you go over to the Ogre City. Obviously, it's going to be hard for you as a good person to get a hold of that Ogre drink. That makes a challenge to the whole thing. So that was kind of my idea, going around basically. It offers us something to do as well to help pass the time, to help sink out the money. And it gives us something to do to build on our resistances into the individual zone areas with their unique diseases and contagions. That was an idea that I discussed with some of the guys as well as an alternative.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of room to play with this idea. I would be a little upset if we don't see a disease-style world event. However, they want to do it.
My whole thing is that, like I said, if they're going to break apart arcane magic and break apart elemental magic, I don't see why they couldn't break apart disease magic also.
No, there's no reason.
More in depth.
You could just go to just straight up disease. You could go to a poison based one, or you could do. I guess you could almost do sub elements to a disease.
Yeah.
A fever, you could consider that a heat or a fire-based one or something.
Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, because you got the weather basically. They're going to have weather in the game. They're going to have environments in the game. It just makes sense to add something.
But I like somebody said something about like certain races could have higher resistibility to certain diseases, and other races could have higher adaptability to certain diseases. Like the more they're exposed to it, the stronger their immune systems get. Stuff like that.
I mean, I'm not too keen on the idea of me being able to pass on a disease. Me getting it, I'm fine with. If my resistance isn't high enough, or I happen to play a class that is not immune to that disease, or is a class that is uniquely, I have a unique attainability to get diseases. I'm fine with that. The whole spreading out the disease, I could see this working in the PvP servers. This would be great for the PvP aspect if you could actually pass on diseases as a player to another player, etc. But I'm not too keen on me being able to go and affect my group members.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so let's just say I decide to group with an ogre, and I'm a dwarf, and now because I grouped with this person to try to finish a storyline, now I got infected by some itchies or scratchies or bumps or whatever. Yeah, I don't like that idea.
As long as they keep it out of players' hands in terms of how it spreads, just like you could have an invisible aura around a player, and if someone else is standing near enough, say it's a 1% chance. Oh, look, they caught it. And it's like, oh, dude, you just gave me the internet hurts.
Yeah,
what the heck?
Everybody's running from that glowing guy.
I mean, to basically break it down, the general idea of what he's proposing, I definitely can get on with. It makes sense since we have weather and the environments affecting us. It makes sense because of if you look alone at the lore of Wild's End, what they've revealed, Wild's End seems to be a very unique place that seems to have dangers and all kinds of stuff that could impact you as a human or as any other race. So it makes sense there. I definitely support that idea. Would love to see something like that. So it starts raining and it's really cold and you've only got cloth on, so you're going to get a cold. You're going to get a cold, dude.
You could almost think of it as a debuff due to environmental effects, even.
Well, because like I said, if the cold's going to affect us or whatever, some zones are going to be so cold you're going to need to have something. Some so hot, whatever. I could see zones having an infectious disease, but while you're in that zone, that gives you some type of debuff or a poison or whatever. And like it could be zone by zone. So this swamp has this disease that has negative whatever, but this other swamp on a different continent, totally different area, has a disease that does that's a dot. It's a ticking dot all the time. They can change up the type of disease throughout the world. Like it doesn't have to be the same disease. And some races might be more immune to it than other, or be higher resist to it. So that's a good thing that they could put in there too to give you more customization.
Cool. So what does chat think about this topic? Definitely check it out on the forums.
Put in your 2 cents.
Biological implications of Terminus. There's definitely pros for it to support something like this. There's some things I personally don't like. I could see a lot of use for this in the PvP aspect of the game. Would definitely make it certainly different for approaching the way PvP is. That's definitely of interest to actually go and look at and see if this is something that could be supported by PvP and give people, the possibility to affect each other on the battlefield.
I mean, it's kind of like, like even in EQ1, you get bit by that rabid dog and you get rabies, and then you can't give it to anybody, but at least you have it. You have to go get it cured, So they could do something like, just because you went and fought in a specific, zone, now you've got the disease, you have to go find a temple, get cured, whatever. Like, it just makes it more in depth.
Yeah. Or
be preventative and have a druid or a cleric or whatever put a debuff, or what was that? I think that the article said something about it, like immunization along to term, long, let's say a 4-hour, you're immune to this disease, then you can go in there and fight and not have to worry about it.
In some MMOs, we had, I remember in EverQuest, I think it's EverQuest 2, just looking at it from the aspect of curing diseases, I think that the Inquisitor could basically instantly cast a cure for the diseases, and it had a longer duration effect on the player, the same as the Druid. The Druid could cast a cure disease, a special spell that they had, and it would basically have 4 ticks on it. So every time you were
my Mystic could do that too. Yeah.
It would basically, you could have 4 times this effect try and hit you, but because you got the spell on you from the Druid, it would basically repel it. So it kind of it's kind of something that you could do. You could approach it that way. That you give the individual healers.
Insane.
Yeah, just not too insane, but you could give the individual healers certain abilities to affect the different environments. Like, for instance, Wild's End, I could see maybe a druid having a better understanding of Wild's End, since it is a creature of nature, etc., or maybe a shaman might understand it, etc., and so forth. So so you can certainly go different ways and look at Terminus as a whole on the map and say, right, we've got this zone, we've got this zone, we've got this zone. We could break it down into the individual healers and or even some of the mages. Maybe there's some areas where it's an arcane disease or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I was saying, like a brain disease affecting mana or a blood disease affecting health regen,
Well, let's actually talk a bit about that, because that was actually a pretty cool idea that you brought up. I'm going to quickly go and review what you wrote to me in Discord real quick. You basically said inherited disease is racial. I can definitely see something like that also play a part, that we have race connected diseases, contagions, etc. Depending on what race you are, you're immune to certain things, etc., etc. Then you brought up the infectious disease, which we kind of talked about, and which kind of connects to the topic itself being zone wide. Brain disease attacked in the mana region, definitely something interesting. Having a disease not only affect your resistances or your ability to react or to cast spells, but to actually, suck out the mana. We all know that in games certain encounters had a mana leech on you, etc. But add something like this in general to the game as a disease makes it more interesting. The same with the blood diseases of health regen. You go into an area and all of a sudden your health bar is getting lower and lower, and you're thinking, what the hell is going on? It's definitely interesting.
Something like a health point one that will actually kill you would have to be something where, maybe it ticks for like 100 damage every 15 minutes. Something where it's enough to make you go, I don't like this, get it off. But not enough to where you're like, well, I'm sick, I'm gonna die.
Yep. I mean, they had, there's been, in our MMOs, we've even had encounters where you weren't allowed to cure the disease. It had to stay on you because its effect was basically, it wasn't negative, it was positive. So you could also add something like that as well. Positive effects that come into the mix as well. And if you cure it, something bad's going to happen.
Well, the only reason why I said of having different forms of diseases, right? Like having mana disease and blood disease and regular disease and poison, all these different types of diseases, is you could break up the cures into different cures. Like a cure mana disease, right, would go to an enchanter or a bard or somebody that, would have a positive and a negative effect against your mana. So it wouldn't be just, I got rabies, let me go find a cleric. It's like, I've got a brain disease, I need to go find an enchanter to cure this, stuff like that. So it gives more options in game.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting post. The idea, it's a good start. Go into the forums, guys. Add your 2 cents. If you've got any other cool ideas, add to it. It's stuff like this that helps bring ideas into the game and even into the genre itself and the industry. Stuff that maybe they never thought of that could be interesting to do. Anything else to add to this topic, or we'll move on to the next, guys?
I think we more or less covered it all. But yeah, when developers and stuff are surfing the forums, you could say something on a topic that's completely in left field, but it might spark something in that developer's mind and go, hey, what if I do something kind of like that, but maybe go a little bit of this route, and all of a sudden you take this post about a certain topic, and then one of their replies that was slightly off center of that, and you get a whole new feature that's not even related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Yep, it's definitely awesome. It's stuff like this that shows that we're all invested in this game, and there's been some great ideas out there from the community, and it's stuff like this that will get you onto our show on Tuesdays to talk about the topics. So carry on bringing out stuff like this, and we will talk about it and get it out there and get people interested in adding to the discussion. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is arena-style PvP Spectator mechanics, and this was also posted by Centro. And while Kodiak pulls up the link, I will start reading off. It's also a lengthy post, but bear with me. In traditional PvE type servers, players can still consensually test their combat prowess against one another for sport or to physically settle a dispute. Meet me by the flagpole after class, punk, or I bet my mage can beat up your mage. Many games have tapped into our competitive desires and provided a built-in framework for us to compete with ladders, rewards, etc. Note, here I am not saying any opinion to qualify the degree of success of this implementation. Some games overdo it, some games underdo it. That type of discussion escapes the purpose of this post. Now, I believe there has been a severely missed opportunity which stems from what I think is a fallacious thought akin to, if we implement a framework for competitive PvP, then we need to give all classes and players an equal opportunity to participate. Surely everyone wants to get in on this action, which we know couldn't be farther from the truth in our community. Not everyone wants to engage in PvP, and not all classes should be great PvPers. An analogy that I like to revert to explain the last sentence is to equate in-game classes to real-life careers. If the setting of PvP is combat success, then of course a carpenter couldn't contend with a martial artist, and a painter should not be expected to go toe-to-toe versus a boxer. Similarly, an enchanter shouldn't be expected to be able to compete with a rogue. I believe the whole respecking and PvP balancing is a non-issue. Let the combat-focused classes be the most successful PvPers. We would never question the fairness of a painter's combat abilities inside the boxing ring by handicapping the boxer. If the painter wants to fight, he should just get destroyed, and that's it. Having laid that foundation, I'm ready to explain my new idea. Just because not all classes are proficient fighters and not all players want to participate in PvP doesn't mean they can't still be involved in the sport. I propose that if an arena-style competitive PvP is implemented in Pantheon, then there should be a framework to support spectators. We know people love to watch sports, and esports is clearly an ever-growing phenomenon. Why not give players the in-game opportunity to watch PvP bouts? Here are a list of possible mechanics that I think would be fun. Number 1. Seated, non-instant physical arenas in cities similar to a coliseum. Spectators would be able to purchase tickets, money sink, to gain entry and build reward pools for the combatants. Number 2. In-game sponsorship. Crafters could outfit combatants with their armors and weapons with the prospect of getting a cut of the rewards if their player wins. Number 3. In-game local ladder system, so spectators could view rising stars and follow their favourite combatant. Number 4, sports betting. Everyone loves a good gamble, right? Let the ladder system calculate the odds of two contestants winning and let spectators bet on those odds. Of course, the house will rake plenty of cash, providing yet another money sink to avoid inflation. I think this would be a widely cool inclusion in Pantheon. The arena system I have introduced would be a novel way to A. keep cities populated and busy, B. provide money sinks to counter inflation, C. establish a novel social venue for in-game downtime, and D. give everyone an opportunity to participate in the PvP system even if their class isn't combat focused. Let me know what you think. So, who wants to start off? Lex, you're nodding your head, so I'll pass it on to you first.
Well, there's a few things that I do really agree with here. There's a few things that I really don't agree with. Because, okay, I'll take this from a PvPer's point of view because I have been a PvPer in the past. Say you go with the whole certain people just can't compete in PvP. It makes sense. It's reality. You know, a gardener can't take on a boxer. Duh. No, no contest. But here's the problem when you put this into a game. What's going to end up happening, unless you have thousands and thousands of classes, you're going to end up seeing, as a PvPer, the same classes over and over again, because you're only going to see 2 or 3, because they're going to be the best builds for PvP. Which means you're going to get bored of it, everyone's going to get bored of it, it's no fun. Variety is the spice of life. So you have to give the people who may not seem like they'd be very good at PvP you have to give them the option to be able to at least have the feeling that they're competing. Because I'm a PvEer primarily. I have PvP'd. So why would you, because I want to be a tank, why would you come out and say you cannot PvP? I don't even like the fact that someone says, or that a game says, you can't PvP unless you respect. From sword and board protection warrior to a dual wielding fury warrior. You know, I hate that because it's all my time is spent primarily PvPing. My gear is set up to the limit for tanking and being able to be defensive. And it's just my playstyle. There have been games like SWTOR when it first came out. Where as a tank, everybody had high health pools. Matches took a very long time. But as a tank, I could sit there in a domination map on a point for 2.5, 3 minutes fighting 2 to 3 other people by myself. I knew I was going to die. There's no way I wasn't going to. But it felt like even though I was a tank, I did good for my team. I stood a chance. I was there and I held my ground. So it was right there. I was a PvEer, but I loved to PvP when SWTOR first came out. I loved it. It was so much fun because it felt like I had a chance. It didn't feel like I had to respec. If Pantheon ends up going with your typical PvP formula, then yeah, you need to do a spectator system. There's no way around it. You have to. Because then, even though I'm not a PvPer, my buddy who is, I can still sit there in the stands and kind of cheer him on virtually, you know? I can feel like I am participating in this match, if just moral support for my friend. Rather than sitting in TeamSpeak or Discord and he's like, oh my God, we're getting flanked. It's like, yay, go guys, woo. So yeah, there does really need to be something there, one way or the other, for PvPers to have even just the illusion that you can participate.
Mm. Nice.
All right, so I got a couple ideas.
Go on in.
So I think that, like I said, like when I used to play Warhammer or whatever, like having designated areas, or arenas or whatever it may be, for PvP. Now that being said, I would love. I mean, you see how many people watch Twitch and watch other people in groups PvP, whatever. I mean, there's millions and millions of spectators that watch people do it all the time. So I don't think that that's too left field either. Now, that being said, I think that that instead of having you having to get different gear and different specs and different whatever, why don't they have like pre-made things like they do in like Overwatch or all those other PvP games where they have like pre-made classes that you get to play to be PvP, and you can level those up. Or I had another idea, if it was like a player or a group versus some type of NPCs that the spectators dictated what came out of the gates.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? So now me and my group are sitting in an arena, right? We don't know what's going to be coming out of that gate. And the people upstairs, based on, they have like a money pool or whatever, and they've got 1,000 plat to spend, and they can either spend it on 5 skeletons, 2 ogres, whatever the case may be, and we just have to be ready for whatever comes out that gate. Now, that also, the spectators then can bet on whether we're going to succeed or not.
And then you can add a twist to it, basically, based off your idea of giving people, pre-spec'd gear, right? You now go ahead and you say, right, Mr. Cleric, you're going to go and hold a 2-handed sword, deal with it. Stuff like that, and make it interesting from that point, because you're going to go and fight off NPCs coming out of this gate. It adds a twist to it and actually makes it kind of fun to see how a group of people would actually interact with.
You have people that basically they set up the scenario. Now I'm the guinea pig because I'm saying, you know what? I want to do this, okay? Mm-hmm. So whatever scenario comes out, they may give me cloth armor to wear
Yeah.
with a shield and a spear, right? Now, if my skills aren't good enough for those, now I'm gonna fail. So A, they've already handicapped me, and B, I have no idea what's coming out of that gate. So right then and there is a complete challenge for me as the player.
But that would also make sense though in the proposition as well. You know, from the PvP aspect. If we go and look at it from the PvP aspect, you know, player versus player, giving the spectators the rule over, hey, player A and player B.
This is the scenario we set up for you guys.
This is the scenario we set up for you guys. This is what you're going to have as weapons, and this is what you're going to wear. Go for it. So you got the rogue, who's normally wearing light armor. He's been given plate. Boom. That's his handicap right there. Makes it interesting. That would also be a cool way to approach it. I definitely like the idea. From the thought of basically having an arena where people can spectate, get involved as well, have something to do to pass time, because I've done it many times in games where I run around in a circle in my city or my area where I am, LFG looking for group, I run around in a circle, I'm chatting in chat, I'm typing in chat looking for so and so, and I've done it for hours on end. But I could also use that time and do something else. I could go and spectate some PvP bouts.
That's what I'm saying. You could have people, like I said, they're not even the PvPers, but they can either, basically they spend money to either handicap the PvPer or to buff the mob or the other, you know what I'm saying? They can either vice versa.
I would
bet on A and give them a buff, or bet on B and give them a handicap, or
We'll have to definitely add to that thought in the forum as well.
I would even classify that as something completely different. Call it PVS, player versus spectator.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying, there's some, I think that's something new that I don't think I've
we'll have to get that put down in the forum.
Having a third part, it's like what you do with your Twitch stream, right? Having your spectators say, I locked you out of your keyboard. Oh crap, right? So same type of scenario.
Yeah.
Definitely,
that's definitely a good way to approach it, and something completely new.
Before you put your 2 cents in, I'm going to put this in your court because you're the EverQuest 2 guru. Didn't EverQuest 2 do something with PvP where they actually had avatars?
I
could have swore that you would get these avatars that you could collect, and when you signed up, they become the avatar instead.
Yeah, they had these battles with the pets where you could use your pets to go and battle out. They had special arenas for the pets. You could go and collect pets throughout the world that were for PvP.
Oh, like Pokemon type crap?
Yeah, something similar to that, basically.
I don't want Pokemon, but I think it would be cool if you could kind of raise your own pit fighter kind of thing, and everyone kind of uses that as a baseline to fight, because that way they can control what kind of gear is available to them, and they could use you can say your pit fighter pet can only go to level 4 max. Then right there you've got 4 tiers of competition, easy to match people up. You can get gear for them, maybe just a few pieces.
It's like having an EQ1 where you have your mercenary and you can put points into different things for your mercenary or whatever, right? So let's say you had some preset, I keep thinking Overwatch, right? Because my son's heck into that game. So they have preset classes that can do certain things or whatever. So I could see, them having PvP like that in an arena setting where, you basically play an avatar. You're not playing as yourself, but you're playing like a pre-made or preset, class.
While the idea, guys, is cool, I'm kind of on the fence with that. Like it's already been said, is chatting. Well, this is turning into a Pantheon Go battle now. It's kind of cool, but I think we kind of nailed it with the idea of the PVS, player versus spectator, and actually changing out the way you as a rogue or enchanter or cleric or whatever, dire lord, go and approach a battle. I think that is the extent I would go to as far as
I agree. like what Frog said. I mean, I'm not a PvPer. I wouldn't do it anyways, but I would definitely spectate and screw with people.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that would be
You're
fun.
like, oh, you get no shield. Okay, sorry, tank. Now you got no shield. Now figure it out. You know?
Yep.
I would heckin' do that.
Or, 10 platinum, all of a sudden you can make spikes randomly pop up out of the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Now getting on
or you
to...
can start the lightning storm, or something.
Getting on to one point that I don't quite agree with is the ladder system. I ain't a fan of that. I'm on a PvE server, and I don't want to see a PvP ladder system, period. While it's cool to go and follow your favorite rising star, etc., and everything, I think what they could do is add a billboard in that arena that lists maybe the top 10 fighters and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's the extent I would go as far as a ladder system. I would like to see it in game where I can go and see who is, go into the options and boom, pull out the ladder system and see that. I don't want that in a PvE server. And I think it basically takes away the whole aspect of PvE, the meaning of PvE.
Yeah, the ladder system is nice, but it's honestly an awful lot of extra coding that doesn't need to be there. Because for me personally, if I see a billboard that's actually got a list of the top 10, we'll just say PvPers, and it can show whatever their kill to death ratio or their win ratio or whatever, the fact that will change on an asset in the game adds to my personal immersion, because it feels like my character's looking at a billboard that changes.
Yep.
Versus the ladder system where I've got to bring up windows in my face and look through stuff. It's less is more in this case for me.
Right, before you get into it, Kodiak, I want to quickly kick on an idea that Frogzor just basically put out there, because this is actually something that just popped into my head, Frogzor. Thank you for bringing that up. Seeing cocads in the arena. Now, let's go with that thought and say that guilds can actually advertise their guild. Like we were talking about with, in the cities you would have the banners of the individual guilds that support this city. Now, in the arenas, guilds can actually add a billboard for their guild, Let's say, I don't know, Guild ABC, Guild Terminus, Guild VOT, etc. And you see these billboards, and they are sponsoring these bouts or the arena. It's also, it's free advertisement. What do you think about that?
I think that'd be great, especially if guilds can pay to get their banner up there. There's a money sink, and people would just go nuts for it, I feel.
Yep. So you can go and bring in your thoughts, Kodiak, towards what we were talking about, the ladder system. And then if you have any thoughts on the paying plat to have your banner put up there in the arena.
The ladder system, like I said, I was never big in PvP, but I know that PvPers are all about their rank and who's number one, and I want to be number one and whatever, and that's good for them. But that's just not for me. Like I said, I would be more interested in the spectator aspect of it, affecting the fights and watching. I mean, you feel how many millions and millions of people watch, streams of Overwatch and whatever, So there's definitely a huge crowd of people that would just watch other people fight, regardless. And then like I said, then you add on the aspect that you can affect the fight in some way, take away their weapons. Now they got to punch each other to death.
They also talked about, I think it was it the last, not the previous newsletter, the one before, actually it was a previous newsletter, where they talked about the alliance system for guilds. They also mentioned guild battles amongst each other. Now, this is where the arena could come into play as well. You could have actually guild teams face it off as well against each other, and have a ranking system on a billboard. Who's the greatest PvP or bouting competitive guild in the arena, etc. Something fun for guilds to do as well. Also to, take care of disputes. Like, instead of meeting us at the flagpole, let's go meet at the Coliseum. We'll sort this out right now.
Yeah. Yeah, also like what Frog said, I mean, that's why I was like, having, lightning strike or poison fog or some type of random spikes coming out of the ground. Like being a spectator and having a say in what happens as you're watching it, that's like that would be epic. That would really be super cool.
We know that Pantheon is not going to have instancing in the game for dungeons and raids, etc. So now let's picture the following. We want to go and do a raid in this zone, in this cave or whatever, and so does another guild. Guess what? Let's take this to the arena and we'll settle it. Who gets to go in there? Boom.
Yeah, well, that's a little too far, but I get the idea.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So it's definitely there's definitely prospects for
this. Because I think that that would mean that PvP would be forced on you because of a PvE aspect. But I mean, there's people that are going to want a PvP, and that's fine. But like I said, in order to make it a new concept of PvPing, would be to have the spectators somehow affect the fight.
Yeah, that would be
in one way or another. And either handicap or plus or minus or, you know what I'm saying? Everybody or, I think that could right there would be like
it's definitely
new
something
reinvention of PvP.
It's definitely something that we're going to have to put down into the forums. So, make notes, guys. Write it in our Discord chat so that I don't forget, and then we'll get it put into the forums. Because that is definitely a cool idea, having spectators go, right, Mr. Dire Lord Lexer, you want to go and do some PvP? Well, guess what? Here's your handicap. First off, we're taking away your plate armor. You're now getting a nice little robe, Mr. Scar.
Can I duct tape some halflings to my chest?
Yeah,
right.
Everybody in the arena has to wear cloth now, right? So now you take the plate advantage out of the thing. So now the casters actually have a higher advantage than the plate people, right? Or everybody wears plate, so now you handicap the casters to, just little things like that. It would be so much fun.
It would be fun.
Oh my god, that would be awesome.
I mean, imagine, a rogue running around with a freaking staff. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody gets a copper dagger, and that's it. No, nothing else. Gotta fight with copper daggers. Go have at it.
That would also be cool. That brings up another idea as well from Celan. Spectators can pick somebody out of the audience. Hey,
I would probably jump into it just for
you're
fun.
it. Off you go, dude.
Tag.
You're tag. You're it.
That would be something that you would actually have to agree to, but
yeah,
because that's more for fun rather than for like the ranking. Like, I gotta have the best gear and the best this and the best that. Because I want to be the top dog, and
It kind of basically brings the PvP aspects, it brings it into the PvE world on a more serious note. It's not, we have to be the best or PvP, blah blah blah. People will look at PvP from a different view because spectators get to decide on how you're going to fight, what's going to be the impacts, what's the stipulations. Hey, Mr. Tank, you ain't wearing plate armor, you're not having a shield, you're not having your great sword, you're getting a little dagger, and guess what? We're going to go and give the rogue and this and that, these kind of weapons, this kind of armor.
Have like butt naked battles with just your weapons. Or something,
Take away the ranger's bow. That takes away his ranged advantage. Hey, Mr. Ranger, you think you're going to go into this fight with a bow and arrow? Forget it.
But see, that's the thing, is that you don't know. You wouldn't even know until the match started, right? Until those gates open, and then it would just be poof. Everybody got put into robes, and then say, go. Or everybody just now got, dual wielding daggers. Go. You wouldn't even know. It would just be total chaos. It'd be so much fun. I think, anyways, right?
Selim says it best, basically. It's all for fun in the world of PvP. And it's definitely, this is what it's about. In a PvP server, the system that we kind of talked about now here, based off on Sintro's post, I could definitely see that being really fun to go and watch, spend time, investing money, plat to say, I want to decide on how this Dire Lord Scar is going to go into battle, or this shaman is going to go and handle things. It would definitely be cool. So we don't have to add to that.
If they can do something where, like for me, when I look at PvE, that's me and a group of friends or some new friends going out to have fun. A lot of these newer games, I don't PvP because it's not about fun.
Yeah.
It should be called Chaos Arena. That's what it should be called. Chaos Arena.
Whoever they decide to go with in the lore as a trickster god, that's whose arena it is.
Yeah.
But if they had a little fun arena where the ranking, there was no rankings associated with it, but it was a way to make a little money, yeah, I'd do it. I'd do it at least every other day.
Yeah, be fun to do. Anyway, I think we can wrap it up for today. On a side note, this Thursday, guys, is the Halflings discussion. We're going to talk about the race, the Halflings, and I might have to touch a bit on the lore behind Wild's End because it relates to that. So join us on Thursday for that at 4 p.m. We're going to the closing statements, guys. We'll start off with you, Lex. Your closing statement.
Well, we definitely got a lot of really good forum topics coming out of the woodwork now. Makes me very happy. Makes me actually really want to check the forums every day. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hats off if I wore one to you. The most important thing I feel going forward is, even with whatever topic it is, it's a matter of it does have to have some appeal to everybody, and it can't be forceful in its method. It's all about letting players decide how they want to interact and how they want to do things with features, like disease. It's up. Don't make it to a player to ruin everybody's day, because that's negative, But you could do funner or more enjoyable things to infect people. Now, there's a lot to be said about PvP, and I know we've only hit the tip of the iceberg. I say I'm a PvEer, but I'm on the side of you PvPers too, because I don't want anyone to feel left out here. But we have to be. You just got to remember, as a PvPer, the more people you can get into PvP, the more fun you're going to have, the more opponents you have. That's the important thing to focus on right now while we don't have any real information. But other than that, we'll see you I'll see you Thursday for the short topic.
Kodiak, your closing statement?
Same thing. I mean, we pull out some really interesting topics out of the forums. As far as the contagions and biological implications, I think that they should just break disease up into more aspects and have the contagion thing, as far as catching a disease from grouping with a troll or grouping with an ogre. No, I don't think that should be. But I do like the other idea with the different types of diseases: mana disease, blood disease, regular disease, rabies, having being cured by different races, different classes, having the ability restrictions. Anyway, it gives it more in depth. As far as the arena spectator thing, see, PvP for me is not fun, right? But that would make it fun, because everything would be unknown. It would be more interesting. Stuff like that. I think that would be a really cool thing. Whether they ever did that in Pantheon, who knows? It would just be fun, regardless. So.
Yep, definitely. So with that, guys, thanks for joining us today. Two great topics. Keep up the good work, everyone. And if you're interested or got any ideas towards these two topics we talked about, we put out the links. Can you put out the links again one more time before we close out? We'll put the links in one more time for you guys to pull it up. And then, add your 2 cents to it. And we will see you on Thursday for the very short discussion, as Lex already put it, the Halflings. And with that, guys, we'll just wait for Kodiak to pull out these links, and then I'll stop talking.
I already closed them all down. I gotta read them.
I'll grab them.
All right, Lex is gonna grab them and then put them in. And sorry for the short news. Actually, before we go and close off, let me bring out the last screenshot one more time, because it was only that picture of the house. And that was the screenshot for this week that we all were privy to. It definitely could use more windows. I can relate to that post, but it's looking good. They're heading in the right direction. We'll have to see what other ideas they come up with. So with that, guys, we'll see you on Thursday on this channel for Voice of Terminus, Theory Crafting on the Halflings. Good night, guys.
I'll try to read the actual lore this time before the show.
Awesome.
No